What's up, everybody? Excuse me. I'm back from Israel. It was a life-changing deal. Feel like a new person. It's one heck of a return back into the States. Not all good. Almost really, really bad. Updated the Bear With community, i.e. patrons of this podcast, on an exclusive podcast feed, but wanted you all to be able to get that update, so it's in the show notes if you want to check that out. So my daughter is now 16. She's the only kid of mine who remembers when I believed in eternal separation from God. Hell, pretty sure I told her it was like a permanent timeout, something God just couldn't help because he can only be around holiness, and he made a way for us to get this holiness, and some people don't choose it, so they are just shit out of luck. I didn't say that last part, obviously. They're out of luck, huh? God just couldn't help. Wants to, just couldn't. Really. So that is just so foreign to me. So I heard a pastor recently, someone I love very much, by the way, and respect, and he was talking about how when we pray for stuff, sometimes the answer isn't quite like how we envisioned that answer would be. He said that as a result of praying for his daughter's salvation, for example, and I could get all these details wrong, but you'll get the gist. So it's like a kid, 4 to 6 years old, I'm guessing. As a result of his prayers for his kids, the answer didn't look how he thought. He put it something like this. So Cutie Pie asks some questions at the dinner table about salvation. Her loving father explains what she needs to do, and she says something along the lines of, "Cool, can I finish my dinner first?" The point was her making a decision that changed her eternal destiny. Looked a little anticlimactic. Point taken. I got it. But I couldn't shake something. So we all know this little girl still had very little understanding of what was going on here in the spiritual realm. So a quick little question like this that she waited to follow through with until after supper, that's what kept her from being eternally separated from God? Okay, well, if she was old enough to accept this truth and result in her salvation, I'd assume then she is also old enough to reject. Seems to be something you can't have both ways. So what if she said, I don't want to do that right now or today, and then, God forbid, later passed away? Does that mean she's eternally separated from God? On another note, that whole age of accountability stuff, let's just say it's 13. You mean to tell me that a punk 13-year-old has enough information now to be morally responsible for their eternal destiny? Honestly, this is just me personally. I'll throw any age up there and ask the same damn question. Where will dwell forever? And a God who says my thoughts and ways are higher than yours? We're still that responsible for something that big? Not to mention, if this little girl accepted God's plan of salvation based on the sincere prayers of her loving father, what about the other kids who didn't have anyone praying for them? Or let's just say they had a parent praying they'd accept the tenets of a different religion. My personal belief is this is what happens when humans try to systemize God. And if you're okay with the setup that I just outlined, sincerely okay with it, I feel, and it's just me, you need to be freed from a tendency of systemizing God with man-made theology. I'm not even saying that I'm right. I'm just saying if you want to take that to the bank and sleep well at night, I mean, guys, let's just start with what Jesus actually said. Not us. Jesus said this, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing." If we start there, does all of the above make sense? I don't think it does. It feels as if either Calvinists are right, that God chooses, and we don't have a choice in the matter, or many, and I mean many of us, are saved based on like a random technicality. So as Lance Haverkamp says in episode 241, back in the summer of 2020, if I'm guilty of anything, I'm fine with being guilty of believing God will show more mercy and more compassion than what is reality. Yep, I'm fine with that. All right, so this episode, I can tell you that I love these two dearly. I've known them now for 15 years or so, and I had no idea the depths of this story. It was hard to hear, but I'm glad that Mr. Randy and Miss Cyndi, they're going to kill me for using Mr. and Mrs., but I'm a Southern boy. I'm glad that they're in a better place. So all of you, please heed this warning. Skip this episode if a recounting of sexual abuses can be triggering for you. I love you, and this may be one for you to skip. So go back to episode 241 and listen to Lance and I ponder what if God is way more loving than what we give him credit for. Then go to episode 306 and listen to me and the incredible songwriter Andy Squires do the same thing. Then listen to Sharon Putt and I debate this possibility, with Chip Judd on episode 330. And if you really want to go old school, go to episode 1 as a time and place where I was just beginning to entertain the possibility of oh great a salvation. I hope that it makes you at least think about it. If you're really interested in the subject, watch the documentary Hellbound, where all positions are represented well, I believe. And if that one doesn't get you thinking, you're just completely closed-minded. So I love you, listener. I love Randy and Cyndi, who you're about to hear from. And as Samuel L. Jackson said in the first Jurassic Park movie, his career just getting started, hold on to your butts. When was the first that you guys heard of an ecstasy treatment? Is that the best thing to call it? Just call it an ecstasy treatment? Is there a better name for it?
Well, the term they use in the study is MDMA.
Gotcha.
That's the way it was explained to me was the clinical name for the drug, right. And the rave name for it, the street name for it was ecstasy.
Yeah.
So it was originally created as a therapy drug in the psychological world where they were, and it got out way back.
Oh, so it was originally for
it was originally for treatment, yeah. Wow. And when it was being classified as a class 1 drug, and Congress was voting on that, they tried to get them. Let's leave it where it's prescribed. Let's leave it in the world of psychology so we can utilize the benefits from it. And they said no, it's class 1 drug. Wow. Period. Not allowed to use it anymore. Yeah,
I didn't know that. So you just found out. I mean, kind of common knowledge. It just has gotten around, or did somebody tell you all about it?
No, it was actually an article in the newspaper, and Cynthia was reading the paper one morning, and that was right on the heels of me having a really bad day.
This is what year? This
would have been early 2017, I would say. Yeah. I was back in therapy and was working through some memories, and we just could not, the traditional therapies were not getting me past the block. It was just
like talk therapy, like
no, it was what they called EMDR, is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yes. Yeah. When I was in my really dark time, my therapist specializes in trauma, and she did that a lot. Like, in fact, she told me, have you had a lot of talk therapy? And I was like, a good amount. She's like, we're not going to be doing too much of it now. And now that's all her and I do is really talk. But there'll be sometimes when the anxiety is built up, I'll be like, let's do the light thingy.
You're right.
Let's do the light thingy.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a couple of different therapists. My original one was a psychologist, and that's who I was seeing at the time. Ironically, during that, like the day or two before, Cynthia had met with her one-on-one because she was struggling with me. Cynthia was struggling with me. Why can't he just get over this? She said, I want to go talk to your therapist. I said, okay, I'll set it up. And it was like right after she went to see the therapist, and the therapist kind of laid out to her, explained to her, there's nothing Randy can do about this. Right. He has to process these memories.
I went to her and I said, I just know that on one day Randy's going to be on his deathbed and he's going to say, my dad took the first 13 years of my life. Why did I give him my entire life? Why did I let him ruin my entire life? Why can't he just put it away? It happened. It's bad. It was horrible, but it's over. And I just was so frustrated. I would just spend hours just so mad that he wouldn't just get over it. And so I went to talk to her, and she said, oh, no, honey, he can't. It's the way God made him. Those memories are there, and they're tickling the back of his brain, and until they are processed, he will never get over it. And that's all I needed. That's all I needed to know. I understand now. And I was reading the paper, and it was an article about the firefighters, all the 9, Charleston 9, and one of those firemen had gone through this treatment, and they talked about PTSD. So,
all Christians see things differently, so I don't want to make any assumptions. Was it kind of a jump, like, okay, we're really going to do this? Because you hear about ecstasy, it just sounds like a recreational sort of party drug. I mean, that's what it is. Popping the Molly, baby.
So I was getting ready to go to work. Cynthia was sitting at the dining room table eating breakfast, and she was reading me this article. Got the ecstasy part. Flags went up in my head right away. Ecstasy. I've never done drugs.
Did you not hear Nancy Reagan? She said to say no.
Right. So she got through, and I just kind of said, there is absolutely no way I'm taking ecstasy. I'm not going to do it. In the story. And I think Cynthia was kind of holding out hope that I might change my mind. And it's funny. I went to work, went through the whole day. I could not get that story out of my head. I just kept kept circulating. I finally just said, fine. So I just texted my therapist and asked her about it. And she wrote me back fairly quickly and says, oh my gosh, I know these people that are doing it. It was done here in Charleston. It's being done here in Charleston. It's not based out of here, but one of the lead doctors that was pioneering it lived here in Charleston. And so she reached out to him in my next session, and we said basically my whole next session was talking to them via on a phone conference. And then they said in the middle we're doing another study that involves couples. Is someone who suffers with PTSD and significant other that lives with them. It's perfect for us.
Yeah.
So I'm just sitting there going,
tell me about the process. Like, I'm really intrigued. We were talking off air, and I've done ketamine treatments, and that was a real magical experience. But I think I was just so deep and dark into it, it made me feel better for the day. And then next day it's back to my nightmare. So I kind of have that as a reference point. But were y'all in a dark room? I mean,
no, actually it was a very open, bright room. We were sitting in two lazy boy recliners. They started out talking to us in the beginning, which is what to expect. Because he explained it to me as, your body heals itself automatically. You have a cut, you have something like that. The body basically knows what to do. He said, so does your brain. He said, you got to get out of the way.
That makes sense. So it's basically clearing the table for the brain to do.
It takes away the fear.
So he holds his hand out and he has two pills in his hand. And that's the first thing I start going to is the Matrix.
Yeah.
And they were different colors. And the only difference between them was it was one was stronger than the other. And he gave me a choice, which one do you want? And I said, I want the strongest one. So that's the one we took. So we both actually took the drug. We laid back in the chairs. We put on blindfolds. They put earphones over our head with some really elevator music. We took the pills and laid back.
And what were y'all expecting and or wanting out of this process?
I wanted to be healed. My whole mission in life during that point in time was I was single-mindedly wanting to get over this. I didn't care what it took, and I almost didn't care what I tried. And so my expectation was I had really high hopes. I was scared in a lot of ways that, God, what if this doesn't work? I don't think I can do this again. I was desperate at that point for the work. And I invited Christ to be there with me. I said, I need you here. I can't do this by myself. I need you with me in this. And so...
If Jesus was there, do you think he would have popped a Molly?
He was definitely there.
No, I mean, if he was there in the flesh, would he have popped a Molly too to give you some?
Why not? Why not?
I love the mixture of really going after and seeking God and really going after and seeking science. Yeah. I mean, I love that you covered all your bases. So y'all just start feeling really good. I mean, are y'all telling each other, oh my gosh?
No, we're not speaking to each other at all. We're both laid back with our eyes closed. And
how long did it take to kick in?
20 minutes, 30 minutes.
And then how long did it last?
It was all day. He took a second dose mid-part.
Whow.
It was an 8 hour
day?
It was an 8-hour day.
Oh my gosh.
Two separate and there were 2 sessions about 3 weeks apart. And it was amazing. The experience was amazing. It was literally what I guess people would call a trip. So I tripped out, and Cynthia did too. It was just different for both of us. She was over there praying in the spirit, just relaxing and praying for me, and I'm over here sitting with Jesus in a vision. It was an 8-hour vision. I'm just not lying. And I was sitting there with Jesus sitting next to me, and it's interesting enough. He was always on my left. I was always on his right. It was like starting from the very beginning when it first happened, first experience of being abused.
And you're seeing it?
I'm watching it.
You're watching it?
Yeah.
You're watching yourself as a little kid?
I'm watching the little kid. I'm watching me.
Now, it was that from the help of the therapist as far as getting you there, or basically
when I was recovering memories and stuff, I would jump back and forth between either being separated from it, watching it, and they would call that disassociation, or I would actually be feeling it. I'd be in it. It was just depending on how my brain wanted to experience that memory. It was really not up to me. It was just how the brain handled the memory. It starts there, goes all the way through, and it goes through all the memories. Pretty rapid fire. I've seen this myself, but I said, gee, I can't handle this. Can you stop? It would stop. And then he would reaffirm me, count for me, say, it's okay, I got this with you. He said, you can do this. He said, and I said, okay, let's go. It was almost like a session.
And so is it retrieving actual memory content in your brain? Like it's going to find those almost recordings of your life that you saw with your eyes, and so they're stored back there, and is it retrieving that? I mean, that's just nuts.
The PTSD is nothing but unprocessed memories. And so when you feel them, it's literally like a flashback. That's why you have the panic attacks, you have the terror, you have all the stuff that went with that episode that happened at that moment. It's all wrapped up, stored together. And that's what was so beautiful about this clinical trial is the MDMA, or the ecstasy, lowers the fear level in the amygdala, and it raises your confidence level. So it allows you to get over, the fear is taken out, allows you to see the memory. It still doesn't take away the painful panics and stuff like that. It's there, but it's much less there. That makes sense. It allows you to be able to physically handle it. But it's completing the memory. What was happening that first session was that the memories were being all filled in. So what was chopped up, the middle was brought together.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to ask, is going into it, and we'll get into your childhood, but through this process, you already knew about the sexual abuse. There were just a lot of gaps that had not been filled in, and would, from a medical standpoint, that's what was keeping you from getting to where you needed to go, was that stuff that was unprocessed?
Yeah, I needed to heal. I needed to get over the PTSD.
And what was the purpose for you? Were they doing treatment for you as far as living with someone going through this?
The session, you were just with me.
Yeah.
She was physically with me and supporting me, and
so you had a good day.
I did.
You had a good day.
I just laid there and I prayed. I said, okay, God, if there's something I need to see, I want you to show it to me. But if there's not, I'm just going to sit here and pray for him. So I just prayed for him the whole time. But he went through so much that day. He was exhausted, but he was curled up in a ball a lot of the time. He was in so much pain. He was shaking. And a couple of times the therapist, he was actually an emergency room doctor. So we felt very safe, laying back and doing that. But he would go over and just hold kind of stand there, and they would take his hand or just lightly touch him just to help him calm down, because it was the memories were just very, very painful.
So however you want to address this, as far as take us through your life, go into whatever you want to go into, and sexual abuse from your father.
Yeah, I mean, so 2008 was a big turning point for me. I was praying one morning. We had just gotten back from being in North Carolina for a job, just returned to Charleston. I didn't have a job at the time. Struggled a little bit. We'd already been to Kenya and all that part, if you remember when we went over to Kenya's missionaries and all. And so anyway, we were trying to get back into our life in Charleston, and I was praying one morning, and I said, I want to go deeper with you. I want to know you more intimately. I want to know who you are. And I can hear, as clear as we're talking right now, I heard a voice say, if you want to know me deeper, I need to show you something. And I said, bring it. That was a big mistake. Because the next thing I saw was the first flashback.
Right then?
Literally right in prayer, I saw the first flashback, and I like to fell out.
About
all my memories
abuse
up until that point had been repressed. Teenager, high school years, all the way getting married and then raising my kids. I was dealing with all kinds of dysfunction. I mean, looking back on it, it was classic PTSD, but I just didn't know what it was. And but it was just a slow, degrading progression from year to year to year to year. I became more withdrawal, more isolated. I cut all my friends off. I mean, by the time I was 40, and I had sexual addiction problems. I had infidelity issues. Part of the sexual addiction, it was fueling it, and I had no idea where it was coming from. I was depressed, so medication.
So you were having all these sexual struggles and had no clue why you were having that struggle to that degree.
Not at all. I had, some memories that were unexplained as a kid, but never enough context to really deal with it.
And just out of curiosity, were you fond of your dad?
I always idolized my dad. I wanted to please him. I wanted to try to get the next praise, because one never followed the other. No, one was disconnected from the other. They were coming at me in very chopped up memories. The flashbacks was enough, accompanied with enough emotions and enough mixed feelings. It was just really screwing me. I was trying to hang on. I was trying to make sense out of it. I was asking, I was getting resentment with God as a, why did you let this happen? Just a very confusing time, which eventually culminated by about 2010. I said, I'm done. And I walked away from everything. I walked away from church, quit small groups. I quit the small group I was leading. I just stopped it all. And I told God one day, I said, I'm done with this. I can't deal with this. I don't know what to do with this. You're not helping. You're not turning it off. I'll tell you what, you know where I live. You know how to find me. When you decide you're going to do something about this, let me know. I'm done. And I walked away.
Were you like, yeah, I told God off. Suck, man.
Oh, well, yeah, in a way, yeah. I mean, I was angry, and it was the only way I knew how to lash back. And I basically, I went to church, but that's about it.
It's funny how sometimes Christians would think that would really offend God. I'm like, my kids have been angry at me, and if I just lose my cool at my 4-year-old basically getting upset, I think God is big enough to handle anger. And so, my earliest memories of my child abuse, best I can tell from the house we lived in, the memories of where I know where it was. I was around 3 years old when it started. And one of the visions God showed me was when I was watching the very beginning. It started with me falling out of a crib. Are you saying God showed you during the ecstasy?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes, during that vision during the ecstasy treatment. He showed me falling out of the crib, my brother coming to look at me. I always had this memory of falling out of the crib. That wasn't a repressed memory, but I didn't know how it fit. So he was showing me how these memories I did retain, how they fit in, where they went.
How do they help that?
Well, it's because this particular one of falling out of the crib set something in motion. So my brother was slept in the room with me at that point. So I was to the point where I was climbing out of the crib. Well, they didn't want to deal with that anymore. I was ready for bed. I was ready to get a real bed. So they moved my brother out of that room, and I was in that room by myself. And right after that is when I started, the abuse started.
I see.
Yeah, so there were, I remember one time I always had this memory of my dad throwing a glass of water. I asked for a glass of water, and he threw it across the room for some reason. I don't know why. He got aggravated at me. That was all I knew. Well, now God showed me the whole thing. My mom put me to bed. I asked her for a glass of water, and the next thing I know is I get this panic feeling watching this big shadow come down the hallway, and my dad comes into the room with a glass of water. So I turn over, and I'm facing the wall, and I feel him sit down on the side of the bed, and I put his arm on my shoulder to pull me over. And I finally just say, "Leave me alone." And after he starts messing with me, touching me, I said, "Leave me alone." And he got mad and threw the water glass across the room, broke it on the wall. Got up.
And this had been going on for a good while. That's why you were turning around, facing the wall. And
So in my adult life, just give you an example from that memory, my adult life, I would, you're in your half state going to sleep, stuff like that. You're kind of in a dream state a little bit, but you're kind of aware you're not asleep yet. I would feel someone sit on the side of the bed. I would feel the covers being pulled back, literally feel it in that state. And I would wake up in a heartbeat panic. I mean,
jeez, I bet.
Yeah. Or no, I got to wake up. I got to wake up. I got to wake up. I was just like, and trying to wake myself up. And, God, sometimes I would just hate going to bed. We went from being in my room, going to work with my dad at his office. He had a place to work out of, but it wasn't necessarily an office. It was just his downtown look at that. But a lot of times I would go by myself with him. So there would be opportunity in that old house. He would abuse me.
So your mom's completely unaware.
Yes.
And did she ever find out, or did she pass away before you had these?
If she knew, which I think she had to have some knowledge, it never got admitted.
Are we talking anal sex?
Yes. Basically about anything you can imagine. The bathroom downstairs was nasty. It was where all his men used. The one upstairs was clean, and I would always sneak upstairs and go to the use bathroom up there. So one day, this door used to be one of these doors was always locked, always closed, never could get in it. Well, one day it was open, standing wide open. There were some magazines laying on the table. I walked over there. I went to the bathroom, then I walked over there, started looking at them, and started flipping through them. And, the way I would describe them for the audience, they're pedophilia magazines, men and boys.
Just out there in the open? Did he have it out there so you would see them?
I have to imagine they were left there for me to see. I don't know, 6, 7, maybe 8 at that point. I was flipping through the magazines. I mean, I don't know. I just curious, maybe best way I can put it. looking at it and kind of into it, flipping. I'm not really seeing what's coming. And my dad walks into the room and he comes around, stands beside me, and we start looking through the magazines together. And I'm seeing this in the MDMA too. This is where I'm seeing a lot of this. I had pieces of it before from the EMDR, but not like this. This is kind of like putting it all in perspective. And next thing, one thing leads to another. It's full on.
And this went on for how long?
Years. As years went on and I reached the point of 10, 11 years old, my dad always had a thing for waitresses. He always liked to go get breakfast at this one particular restaurant. Well, this one restaurant, there was a waitress there named Sue.
Is your dad attracted to women?
Yes, he is. This particular lady took a liking to me. Young kid. She's real pretty. So, of course, I'm going to feel pumped up and puffed up kind of thing. So, yeah. So, carry on conversation. But it was the lunch counter, basically, is what it was. Anyway, one thing leads to another. And one day, I'm cutting, I was taking out time saying, she said, what are you doing today? Well, I'm cutting grass for Dad. He has some properties downtown. So I cut all the grass, that kind of thing, make some spending money. And she said, I need my grass cut. Well, the next time I go, I find out I'm going to her house to cut her grass. And she invites me in. She shows me a lot of attention, gets me something to drink, gets it real hot outside, invites me in, and she starts showing me affection. Kissed me.
And she's how old?
I don't have a clue. I mean, she's young. Look, I would say if I was what I visualize now, she's probably in her 30s. Dad would have been in his 40s at that time. I'm 11-year-old kid. What do you think? Hormones are raging.
She's in charge. She's the adult.
Absolutely. And that's the way it went for a long time. I couldn't wait to go cut her grass. Then it kind of started taking a little bit of a slow turn, and it moved from role playing.
Is this kind of like his way of being kind to her by letting her have access to his son? I mean,
I think it was more nefarious than that.
I hate the word kind.
What I know now is this was the beginning of a grooming process. She gained my trust, had me all in, and then slowly turned it toward grooming me. And it was kind of like a frog boiling in water. It's just, you don't get shocked and jump right out. You just kind of, it went from normal sex to started getting a little bit weirder. And then it was role playing and dressing up. And then the dressing up for me started turning more feminine. She would always have a new outfit for me to wear when I would come over and work at her house. And eventually it evolved to the point that it was, instead of just kind of looking, a little bit femme, kind of in the middle, it became more and more flamboyant.
Yeah, she didn't make you cut the grass in that, did she?
No. And sometimes I wouldn't even cut grass. It was just evolved to that. A lot of times I would go out. It didn't take long to cut a grass.
And you were still getting paid? That's a deal right there.
I guess. Yeah. So
I think it's a good question to ask. Is that inappropriate for me to make little jokes when we're actually talking about abuse? Because
I don't think so.
because obviously we're kind of reflecting on a pubescent boy getting hit on by a hot woman.
From this point on, this is where the grooming started, and for the full on board pedophilia, trafficking, ritual abuse. That's where it all went. All in all, if I take the whole picture, I would have. And I had to live with something out of it. I was okay. I would have been okay with just me and Dad. Never gone any more than that. Compared to what I went through, that's a win.
And you threw trafficking in there. Were you trafficked?
Yes.
What does that look like?
Around 14 years old, I was invited to go to a summer camp under the skies. This is a story that Sue had this boyfriend who was a big man that worked for my dad. There was a story was hatched for my mom's sake, I think, to get it okay for me to go to this summer camp. I go to this camp and I'm immediately dropped off. Dad drops me off, and then Sue takes me into her care. She's there. We start walking through the camp, and I start to realize that, there's situations going on in this camp with other boys, boy on boy. One of the first things that really grossed me out beyond all aspects I've never had been forced to do yet. This camp evidently was used to bring people to. They were used to condition them. They used it to kind of really ultimately break them. Their will was just basically gone. But there was this one scene, there was this one place on this gazebo by a lake. I was dressed very feminine, and I was brought and presented to this guy who came there. So he was brought there to be with boys. And I was made to perform.
Brought there because he was going to pay for it. He was paying money.
Yeah. So the camp had multiple purposes. They were training kids. They were scare events for the kids to get control over them. And not even sure how long I was at the camp. I think what God has given me through this recovery process is what I needed to know, and the rest doesn't matter. I used to really want to know it all, but now I don't really want to know.
What were some of the gaps that were filled in by the ecstasy experiment? So
the treatment, we had to spend the night because we were still under the influence of drugs. They didn't want us going home. They were monitoring us all day. I mean, what they explained to me, they said, this is what's going to happen. This process today was basically the brain knew what memories needed to be processed. So that's what it presented. This is what needs to process, is what we need to get through. He said, but what's going to happen afterwards, and this is what we'll work through, they said, for the next 3 weeks before the second session, is you're going to get an influx of memories just pouring in. He said, you're going to start getting a sense of where they fit. He told me one of his earlier people that went through the treatment described it like, it's like I'm reorganizing my file cabinet. Oh, wait a minute. This goes here. This goes in this drawer. This goes down here. And, you had all these memories, but you really didn't have a sense of where they fit. But also there was a huge amount of emotionals, ups and downs through that 3 weeks. I mean, it was a rough ride, a really, really rough ride. But they told us to expect all that.
And I'm sure some of our listeners are wondering, was your dad alive during this time?
No, my dad passed away in 2000. And my mom passed away in 2012.
So after the ecstasy, did you have a newfound anger, sadness towards your dad? Was there like an extra measure?
That's complicated. I've gone in and out of that. So I'll share with you one of the memories from one of the visions from ecstasy. Maybe it'll answer that question. In the end of the second session, Jesus takes me into a vision. He says, I got someone I want you to meet. And then comes my mom.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting this.
Yeah. And so just to give you some perspective, the vision had no context. It was like standing in a room that was all grayed out around the edges. And it had no bound. You couldn't see a boundary, but you couldn't see beyond a certain point. Jesus was standing in there with me. And then my mom just kind of walks through that boundary and is there. And then my brother walks through the boundary and is there. And they both talked to me for a second, hugged me.
And is this more real than, those dreams you wake up from? You're like, I cannot believe how real that felt. Is this realer? Like a lot?
Like a lot.
Like, gosh. So, yeah. I mean, you're almost feeling hugging your mom.
The feeling I had in there was the only feeling I could feel was just the most content, joyful feeling you could imagine. That's all that was in there, period. Nothing else. I mean, I didn't even feel panic, fear, all that disappeared in that vision, in that one vision. And you could see them. Mom didn't look like she looked when she died. Neither did Wayne. They looked much younger, had them in their prime. Then another person walks through the barrier. My dad. And I'm sitting there going, this is heaven. What is he doing here? I was incensed. I was so angry. Even looking at him, I mean, their bodies glowed. It's just like joy was emanating from them. It's like you could wrap your arms around it.
From your pops too?
Oh, yeah. And I had a lot of mixed feelings there. Now, he stood off to the side. He didn't come all the way up like Wayne and my mom were. And I think that was on purpose. But I think God wanted me to know he came late to the party, but he came. That's okay. But I wasn't there yet. That was the first time I'd really, really felt a resentment and an anger. And I'm probably glad he didn't get too close to me because I might have busted him. I mean, that's just that was in me. I said earlier I wasn't feeling all that, but I was experiencing that. But I was still experiencing all that joy. And the joy was much stronger than what I was experiencing. So Mom talked to me. She hugged me. She said, I know we didn't do everything right, but I want you to know one thing. She looked over at Jesus. This guy's got you.
Man, kind of gives you chills. Yeah. It gives me chills. Let me ask you this, because we've talked a lot on this podcast. We've talked about whether or not people truly encounter God through hallucinogenics, or is it a part of the hallucination? Mm-hmm. You're basically saying this was Jesus. This wasn't a vision of Jesus, but this was Jesus meeting me in this state.
Yeah,
or does it matter?
So I got a theory about this. So, Jesus will meet you where you are. He knows I'm wired logically. I need to know. I always asking the whys. I want to understand. And so when I heard about this clinical trial, my mind was made, this is the way I'm going. And I asked Jesus to come with me. And he said, okay, you want to do it here? Let's do it here. That's the way I think about it. I mean, there's probably many ways that Jesus could have done this healing. You know, it also, I think maybe there's a free will in here somewhere. And this is what I felt like I needed, because I could get my head and arms wrapped around it physically. And he said, okay, I'll meet you in there. We'll do it there. So that's why I think, you know, sure, I tripped. I get that. The medication helped that. But why can't he meet you there?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. So
I'm good with it, Randy.
Yeah. The visions were incredible. The visions were really incredible. After that particular vision was done, Jesus said, come on, I want to take you somewhere. And we start walking, and I noticed something catches my attention straight up in the air. And there was the most brilliant colors streaking through the sky, colors that I just can't even describe. And we're just kind of walking along, and I'm just kind of looking up. There's still nothing. There's still grayed out to the left and right and in front. But all of a sudden, I'm noticing the colors start, you know, it's like something's clipping them off, and they disappear. I mean, the whole experience was just so surreal and so peaceful and so complete. You know, if that even makes, that's only the words I've got for it. I asked, where are we? You're in the throne room.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad we're not live.
Take all the time you need.
So the next thing I hear is this booming voice that says, who is this? And Jesus speaks up immediately. This is my friend, and I vouch for him. So the next thing I hear God say, I will say the voice wasn't coming from like we talk, directional. I mean, it was like it was coming from in me, from outside me, all around me. I mean, it was just like, wow. So if you can feel a voice, I mean, you were literally feeling it.
If I were in your shoes, and do you mind sharing your age?
61.
61. Would you say that you were completely free of this when you're like 56? I mean,
I had an expectation that I was done. So did Cynthia.
I did too.
And
when you say I was done, you were done struggling with this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay, I'm healed now. Everything's gonna be great.
Right after the treatment.
Yeah, right after treatment. I mean, I was still reprocessing some things. I really felt in my spirit right then I needed to work on the spiritual side. We had dealt with the PTSD. I was still holding God back. I was holding relationships back, you know, personal relationships back, and was just not moving forward spiritually.
Do you ever think, I mean, you could get stuck here for a long time dwelling on what your life could have been like had your dad not done had you not experienced any of this. Mm-hmm. Do you ever ponder that, or
I have?
Was that good to do, or would you say, probably shouldn't do that again?
No, I did think about it, and I think it even came up as a question in some of the therapies we had, and I said this many times over the years. I said, you know, if I had the choice today to go back in time and stop this and relive my life, how different would my life be? Would I have ever met this wonderful woman sitting next to me? Would I have my kids? With my grandkids? What if I really enjoyed football? What if this never happened to me and I stayed in football? I had a mental breakdown at 14. Put me in a hospital. I had to quit football. would have changed at that point in my life? No way in heck would I undo what I know I have now. I would live it again.
And I'd imagine you would live it again?
I would live it again to make sure this happened. My kids happened. My grandkids happened. I love them that much.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I don't want to lose my kids. So if I had to.
Yeah.
But our life would be very different if it had not happened, because it affected.
Yeah, if this...
We had so many hard...
I didn't talk about this before, but at 14, I had a mental breakdown right after that camp thing. And I was put into the hospital and went into the mental ward. That event stopped my abuse. Never happened again after that. It scared my dad. He actually fired the guy right after that. I think my mom somebody found out something in there. No one's ever admitted it, but someone suspected. I did at the behest of my original therapist, asked me to send off my medical records, and they sent them to me. And it shows that I was in the hospital, showed that I had some kind of trauma. They didn't identify the trauma. It was definitely I had been traumatized. But it was just kind of like the rest of it, they just kind of swept it under the rug. It's like my life switched after that. All the memories disappeared.
Because of what they did.
Well, they did a shock therapy on me. Back then, it was like, so that's why I had huge blocks of memory gone. From that point on, my life shifted. I actually had really good rest of my youth. That's where I met Cynthia in 8th grade. Right after that.
Our life would have been very different because he struggled so much with not knowing what the memories were, but the sexual addiction. He was awful. It was a lot of hard years. I say we've been married 40 years. I used to say we've been married 4,000 years because some of those years are at least 4 or 5 years long. But we survived through God.
Was y'all's sex non-existent?
Oh, no. No, my mind could whip up any kind of sexual role play and fantasy you could imagine. And it had to be that way. So I was structuring our sex life. That was our sex life. To me, sex was not intimacy. It was not love. It was a structured act. Cynthia played along. I
didn't know any better. He was the only one I'd ever been with. So
yeah. And
must be how it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally a miracle and the grace of God that Cynthia and I are still together. Because I can't think of too many women that would have put up with what I put her through. To be honest with you.
We also had our own business, and because his mind was not in the business, it was all this sexual addiction stuff. We lost that. We had to file bankruptcy and lost everything and had to start over again. But so a lot of that would be different, I hope. And we would be in a much financially, we'd be in a much better place than we are now. But relationship wise, I just kept knowing, I knew it would get better. I knew there was a good Randy in there somewhere. And if I stuck with it, he would finally come out. And he did. It took a lot of years, but
I'll say that you're a patient woman. Goodness gracious.
It was a good 25 years.
And
easy.
When did the flip switch for you as far as frustration turning into actual empathy?
Going to see the therapist changed it all. Just totally changed how I felt about it. It wasn't something he could just flip the switch on.
Right. So you took that in big time.
I knew then. I realized that he couldn't do it. That we had to figure out how to fix it. But he worked so hard to get better. I mean, he was really bad for a lot of years, but once God told us what happened, going to those therapy sessions, he would almost be, I would imagine he had to pull over to the side of the road to throw up. He knew it was going to be so bad. He would just sit in his office.
I did throw up a couple of times.
And I'd go in there, I'd say, you got to go. It's time to go to your appointment. And he'd be like, oh my gosh. So, and he worked so hard to get better. So there was no way I couldn't not hang in through that.
So it was like that going to every one of those sessions. I literally had to drag myself there. I mean, you'd just sit in the car before I walked in the appointment and just be blown out of the water coming out. And I can only say God was the only reason. He gave me just enough strength to do it each time. Because, I mean, I tell you, my prayers at night, I prayed to him every night, whether I was madder than heck at him or praising him for something. So, even the highs and the lows. And he reminded me of that not long ago. He said, you stayed faithful and prayed to me even when you didn't want to. Even if the prayer might be, today sucked. Good night.
I wonder if every time you prayed, though, there was like some mental reframing that maybe even so subtle you didn't even pick up on. We carry on conversations on this podcast a lot, and something that we've talked about twice now, and obviously your perspective is super interesting, but we talk about how sad it is for pedophiles to have that attraction. Like, and I don't know, how does that make you feel for me to say like that there's no excuse? It is absolutely horrifying. Your dad knew better, but isn't it sad? Like, how do you feel about pedophiles given that your life was?
My first reaction is it's sick and evil and it has to be stopped. So there's laws. They're not carried out very well, but there are laws. And if we executed those laws, we need to get these people off the street. We can minister to them later, but we need to get them off the street and get them away from our children, protect our children.
And you don't think we're doing enough?
Heck no. We're hardly doing anything to affect the problem. And you look into media today, they're putting articles out there basically affirming pedophilia. So our society and our mass media is all over the place. And don't contradict them or they'll out you. I don't know what the answer is to that. I have sympathy for people who abusers who are victims. I don't have sympathy for people who are partnering with evil. They actively know what they're doing, and they do it in a narcissistic way, and they do this in partnership with Satan. And that happens. I was part of I was involved in a satanic ritual group, and it is nothing but pure evil. I'm not saying these guys are too far gone. They're still God's children, but I don't know if I have sympathy for them either. Okay. I may probably draw the line there. I mean, I don't think we put a face on evil like it needs to be put. Destroying a kid's life and ruining their life and leaving them with the baggage to deal with the rest of their life. As far as I'm concerned, it's just as bad as murder.
Right. With experiencing having kids, you guys, 2 grown girls and my kids still in the house, we know what it feels like to love our kids. Is there a shred of that in the dynamics from your father to you through all of this? Do you look back and think, while he was destroying my life, he also loved me as his son?
There's not a doubt in my mind that my dad loved me. He loved me.
And so what kind of my follow-up to that is he guilt-ridden all the time? Like thinking, or is he so sick that he doesn't feel like it's affecting you and you're enjoying it?
I remember his latter years before he passed, and I would go by his house and see him. Their parents were separated during those years. And he looked so sad all the time, just looked broken, basically drank himself into the grave. He was 75 when he passed. I look back on that now, knowing what I know today, that he was tore up. He had to be. Can't imagine not me. I mean, I can't answer why it didn't perpetuate down. God showed me this too.
None of your siblings either?
Not that I'm aware of. No. None of us are perfect. We all got our issues. Sure. All had our issues. So.
That is interesting that out of all your siblings, no one carried it to the next generation.
Yeah. I think I know what happened though. So, and God showed me this later. When I was 4, my grandmother came to visit us, and 4 years old. I mean, my brain's not structured enough to have a sensible conversation about being abused by, but we were talking one day. She used to come stay a week with us. And we were talking one day, and I was sitting on her bed, and I used to love to sit with her, and she had cherry cough drops in her, and I wanted some cherry cough drops because I thought they tasted really good. I was telling her about going to work with Dad and doing some stuff, spending time with him. She said, "What kind of things do you like to do?" And at that point, the way I shared it with her was, "This is what we do together. This is our special time." That's what Dad called it, our special time. And I can see. I remember now. I can see the horror in her face, and she got really quiet. And all she said was, "Oh my God!" And she got real quiet and said, "I'm going to take care of this. You don't have to worry." And she hugged me, and I just loved her smell. And I fell asleep on the bed with her, took a nap. And then when I woke up later, she wasn't there. And I heard her and my mom down the hallway arguing. That was the last time I saw her. She passed away right after that.
Goodness gracious.
And God showed me later, this was later in these visions I had, ecstasy vision, that what he did, because I had a one-on-one with her too, separately from my mom and brother and dad. And he told me that what Mama did was, before she died, she prayed protection over me and asked God to look over me. And I think that prayer set in motion protection and covering from the love of a grandmother.
Wow.
Yeah. So I hope the audience is your grandmother. Your prayers mean something. And I think that's changed my whole trajectory. It didn't take me out of it. You know, it's this free will stuff that I don't get all the time. I wish, you know, if you want free will, you got to give it a have it all.
When you figure it out, give me a call.
Yeah.
How that works. You give me a call. Tell us about this book.
Yeah. So,
y'all have a title for it yet?
Yes, Our Born Identity.
Our Born Identity.
Coming out of the clinical trial, in some of my frustration, I just felt like God said, write your story. So I sat down and wrote a memoir, 100 pages, you know, probably 30, 40,000 words. I mean, I literally wrote down the vision from the NVMA, everything all the way from the beginning, all the way to the end when I got out. And then I didn't know what to do with it. I actually sent it out to a couple of people that would consider publishing a book, you know, people sending me your whatever you got, send it to me. And nobody was interested in it. I mean, it was very, in its form that it is, what I wrote, I mean, it's very graphic. It's probably way beyond what a normal audience would read. So this past year, when we were in Nashville working for the previous company I was with, Cynthia and I just kind of reached a point, or she reached a point, said, if God's telling you to write this book, we need to get on it. You know, so she usually jumps in and help. I've been on the internet looking for a ghostwriter or someone to kind of help coach, because I have no idea. I don't even know where to start. So all I had was this. I didn't know what to do with it now. We found this author. There's a collaborating author in Greenville, South Carolina. Her name's Rebecca Davis, and she has been just amazing. She has jumped in. She took our story. She sat and listened to 40 hours of video and audio from the MDMA sessions. She's constructed a story. So she's taken all my memoirs and all the stuff that we've got.
And she's immersed herself in it.
Yes, she did. It was literally crazy. I mean, she was even, I would say so happened here. She would send me a note. I was looking on Google Maps trying to find that. And so I'm just, just kind of cool. I mean, she really invested into it, and she's written the story in a way that it's me telling my story, but it's in a story format. We've been reading through sections of it. Now it's finally, this is the second draft she's calling it, but it's first time it's all been together succinctly in one document. We're to the point now that once I approve this, it goes into final copy, and then we go to publishing. So we're right now trying to decide, are we going to do Amazon publishing, or are we going to do traditional publishing? So,
and do you see this book kind of like multi-purpose?
Yeah. So when she was asking me, what's the purpose? What do you want this for? And I told her, I just really feel like God is calling me to a ministry to minister to people who have dealt with this problem before, that are stuck where they are. They're lost. They don't know where to go, what to do next. She says, well, I think this is multifaceted. She said, I think this is also for the wives. And so she encouraged Cynthia to be part of it. So Cynthia's got chapters in here from her perspective. And so, because she says she ministers in sexual abuse and satanic ritual abuse, and she speaks at churches and does podcasts and all kind of stuff. So she's been doing this for like 10, 15 years. So she's perfectly orientated to my story. From what she sees working with women is that there's women, just like Cynthia was, she couldn't understand what was going on with me. Watching their marriage fall apart. The men are all bottled up and won't talk about what's going on because, I didn't want to talk about it. Just uncomfortable to talk about it. And she didn't want to hear about it, but it was still breaking. It was hurting us. It was eroding our marriage too. So she feels like this will help give women some hope and maybe give some men, and I say, hey, I was dealing with that. I was dealing with years of not knowing why I'm acting out, why am I drinking, or why am I Why am I have sex addiction, or why am I depressed all the time? And I'm convinced that those are symptoms of a root cause. You can treat the symptoms all you want, but until you fix the problem, they're going to continue to be, they could continue to fuel.
Right.
What are the stats? Like 1 in 10 people.
It's unreal.
It's like 4 in 10 for men and 6 in 10 for women that have been abused. I mean, the numbers are staggering.
It is.
And
well, congrats to not getting KO'd by what would have KO'd a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we all believe in God and his provision, but also y'all's married. I mean, I'm a youngster. Yeah, I'm talking to people who have more life experience, but I just want to say, like, man, good job. Like, y'all are married.
Yeah, it's a miracle.
And I would, I mean, your wife gets a lot of that credit.
She gets a lot of credit.
And were you motivated by a deep love, like at your depths? Is that what kept you going? You just loved the guy?
For so long we didn't know what happened, so we didn't know why he had those issues. So it was probably harder before, not knowing why he was acting out like he was. I mean, the porn part, he didn't mention that much, but he spent a lot of time in that. But I just knew one day he'd be better. But I really truly believe God kept us together. Anybody, don't think you're gonna put it away, the memories, and you're going to just go on with your life, because you're not. Because those memories are going to come out. So you've got to deal with it.
Got to address them. Yeah.
I mean, here we are, we're 60 years old, and it's finally it's really good. It was a lot of hard years, but it's really good now. And just think if he'd gotten therapy.
There's nothing that's going to cause y'all to get a divorce.
It is kind of comforting.
You ain't throwing in the towel now.
Our marriage is like armor plated. I mean, literally, it's there's not much that phases us. I mean, I'll be honest with you. There were things that she didn't know about that I did while we were married that I had to come clean on when we wrote the book. And when I would never forget. It was not that long ago. I was reading through one of the sections that she was sending to us, chapters, and I said, "Uh-oh." And I stopped and I walked, because she was parallel reading with me. I said, what chapter are you on? And I said, I need to talk to you before you get here.
But at that point, it was just another drop in the bucket.
My point was, it was like a bullet bouncing off. I mean, it doesn't have any.
And I'll admit, I wasn't perfect. Then we were going through all that. I made a mistake too, which, made me realize that you're very fallible. But, I felt very unloved at the time. And there was somebody who acted like I was real loved. I wasn't perfect through the whole thing, but God was there, God was determined to.
Grace abounds all the more, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So one thing I wanted to say is that his dad started out abusing him, and that went on for a lot of years. But he feels like that other man saw his dad somehow and became a part of it. And then we feel like he got blackmailed.
Yeah.
So I don't think his father would have ever taken it to the camps or the trafficking part. Yeah. He got trapped.
Yeah, this thing got a life of its own, and I'm convinced my dad was blackmailed. My dad was being abused by these other men, very ritualistic, and at one point he and I were forced to perform together. I mean, those memories were hard to see. But they're trauma memories, and that was the point of it. They needed to be seen. The vision starts out. I'm in this dark room, it's almost like a log cabin kind of setting. Very rustic looking. There's a fire going in the fireplace. There's this old mantle behind me. There's a small boy standing next to me. It's me. I come into the room, and he's looking up at this thing on the middle of the mantle. And it's kind of odd looking, kind of a box. It's got holes in it, kind of something like a kid would make, made out of metal. And then Jesus walks in, comes through the door, starts talking to us, and asks how we're doing and that kind of thing. And he goes, he says, "What's up on the mantle?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Can I have it?" And the little boy looks at it. And he says, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, because
sure.
I'd have to read I got it written out, but I have to read. There's a dim light inside the box. He's scared to death to pull it off the mantle. So he looks at me and says, "You get it." So I walked over there and I picked it up and I start looking inside of it, and I realized it is a tattered, torn, bleeding heart pumping.
Golly.
And
Jeez.
and I looked down at him and I said, "What do you want to do?" And he said, "You give it to him." And I said, "Okay." So I handed it to Jesus. He inspects it. He says, "Where's the key?" It was locked. And next thing I know, the kid's reached into his pocket and he's holding the key up. Gives it to him. Jesus walks out, doesn't say no word. We're just, we're sitting on the floor. I was holding his hand, the little me. And Jesus walks back in a few minutes later. There's no door on the cage anymore. The box is beaming, just bright light coming. I almost have to because the room was so dark. He hands it back to me, and I look at it and I show it to little me. It's still scarred, but it's healed, and it's just beating strong, and it's just glowing. I mean, before it looked like it was about dead. They put it up on the mantle, and he looked at both of us, and put his arms around us. And he goes, "No more will you two be apart." And then within an instant, we were merged together. It was just me. We all get off path from time to time. And I tend to think it's like the Holy Spirit uses, it's like Google Maps. It's in redirecting, get you back to the path you need to be on. He has stayed with me every step of the way, all the way through. He's patient, he was kind, he was loving, and never gave up. I can't say that for me. I told him many times, I'm just not doing this anymore. If you don't mind, how about taking me home?
Yeah.
I just want to go home.
When we're faithless, he is faithful.
Yeah. And but he encourages me. The only reason I'm not 100 yards down the trail is me. It's not him, it's me. That's what my message would be to the men out there. You're at a point in your life. It doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter how you're hurting right now. God's going to meet you right there if you'll let him. My story is not going to be their story or the other people's story. God's got a unique story for each person, a unique path that he's going to take them on. Don't give up. Press in. And even when you abandon him, he's not abandoning you. He wants you that bad.
Going after the one.
Yeah.
Leaving the 99.
I told him all the time, I said, why me? Why do you got time for me?
Gosh, you could be saying, where were you all these years?
I did say that.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
even during those, that was part of my problem. That's what kept me from trusting for a long time was I couldn't reconcile why he didn't stop it. But what I wasn't seeing, a lot of times when you're in the midst of what you're dealing with, it's really hard to see the bigger picture. I don't have all my answers answered, but one day I will. But I think I've had enough answered now that I can move forward again and I can finally live my life. And I'm excited to do that. It is exciting. I spent my whole life trying to control my world, try to keep some sense of stability around it because I just felt like I was so out of control. And now I'm being asked to surrender control. I mean, that's not natural for me. That's that's an unlearning thing that he's working with me on as to how to be free in my own self to make decisions and to live life, but also partner with him in that. And that's just so foreign for me. And I don't even hardly know where to start. It's just like, I feel like I'm falling on my face about every other minute. But, he's right there. He picks me up. He dusts me off and says, let's go try that again. It's kind of like, I feel like maybe I'm in a rebirth and reboot of my spirituality. All the stuff that was a problem before, the health, the mental health, spiritual aspects, those things needed to be worked on. It's okay to be down. It's okay to take it a day at a time, get up each day. A lot of my prayers were, just give me what I need for today. I can't even think about tomorrow. I don't want to think about the rest of it. Just get me through today. I'll deal with tomorrow when tomorrow comes.